jump. Waved off from, got skunk in my suit in a rave, drop an egg with your mum. Young man's drunk, so tight, too cute, no effort.
I do it nonchalant. Bendy when he had to go get that done.
Disclaimer, I'm not any more woke than you, this is just how I see things. I can be wrong. I have a history of being a fuck up. I got sent to the principal's office in first grade, which was 1 month into a new school. Almost got suspended/expelled from that same school in 5th grade for kind of almost starting a fire. I got put on education probation in 8th grade, and there's a lot of other stuff, but all that damage was personal. I could tell you that story, but nobody cares if you're a shitty person to yourself. That's not what this video is about. People tune in when you're shitty to other people. So I did my first actually shitty thing sometime during sophomore year of high school. I thought I'd learned from it, and maybe I did, but I ended up doing something equally as shitty about 2 years later. And then I did something again the next year, and eventually it just got to the point of, why is it so hard to not do something shitty for the rest of my life? Like, mistakes are generally okay as long as you learn from them, but because I kept making them, was I even learning? I remember in 8th grade, I was Snapchatting this girl named Savannah. We don't talk anymore, but she's out there somewhere and really left a mark on me, and she might never know that. Anyways, I told her about how I hated this person at my school, and I had an extensive list of reasons, and all she told me was, people change. I said, yeah, right. Well, a couple years later, I could easily see somebody talking all that smack about me to somebody else. As fucked up as it is, the people that I respect the most are those who I've wronged and have chosen to forgive me. I find that priceless because they've allowed me to come back into their lives, and I wouldn't be able to do the same thing. So let's talk about change. There's this philosophical debate about whether we have the ability to change our futures. Like in high school, we read East of Eden, and one of the biggest topics in that book was the idea of Tim shall, or thou mayest. Basically, whether we have the choice to change the course of our lives. I like to believe that we possess that choice. Like, I can't get behind believing that we are who we are from birth, because that would imply that life is meaningless. If I go to Sonic and I order a corn dog, if I found out that ever since I was born, I would order a corn dog that day, that would mean I made no decisions that day, which would make that day and my existence kind of meaningless. I think we're born with inherent traits and preferences towards things, but also that we are capable of being who we want. Moonlight was a movie that really sent this idea home. The structure itself is split into 3 chapters, where the main character undergoes different nicknames throughout his life to suggest that personal growth can be so drastic that we can disassociate a previous version of ourselves from a current version as 2 different people. To me, that's a really powerful idea. Like, I can say wholeheartedly that I would hate the 7th grade version of me if he showed up to my house tomorrow, because he was more rude, more arrogant, more of an asshole than I am now. So with my premise that I have the ability to change my life, does that make it more or less tragic if I don't reach my goals? In my opinion, it's more tragic. If I have the ability to change myself and still fail, then that means my efforts were not great enough to reach something that was well within my grasp. Now, I believe that perfection is unattainable, but to criticize anybody for striving to be perfect is foolish. If I'm not striving for anything, that makes me complacent, and complacency is a cousin of failure. When you're complacent, you worry about doing too little instead of striving to do more. And I've been there before, and I can say that just because you're happy with where you are currently doesn't mean you'll be happy tomorrow. For example, my biggest motivation for basically perfecting my babka recipe was giving my girlfriend's family a horrible babka. I did not know until she cut it open and sent me a picture, and nothing motivated me to improve like that experience. And on the topic of what we are and who we become as role models, there's somebody close to me who's struggling with growing up and seeing that the role model that they followed without question in earlier years of life makes mistakes too. Like, the story of growing disappointed with a role model isn't a new one either. J. Cole, who's been in my frequent rotation since his album dropped last week, described it vividly in his single False Prophets. The first verse talks about how his appreciation for his childhood role model in Kanye was soured over time. He describes the early days of Kanye's stardom and how he once saw him as a hero, and that's what makes his plummet from stardom so hard to swallow. Cole admits that he feels like a fool for seeing Kanye as a role model in the first place, and finally succumbs to the idea that his idol has fallen from grace and will never return to form. He shows his self-awareness in the second verse when he flips the idea by at first asking if he himself is motivated to create music because of his own passion, or rather the ability to become the role model for somebody else. To finish the last verse of the song, Cole reasserts that he's doing it all for himself and promises that he won't become a false prophet as his role model did. Lastly, although many do look up to him, Cole reminds his audience that he is merely human like them and that his listeners should keep faith in themselves regardless of what lies ahead for them. Now, other than that cementing me as a delusional Cole fan, what was the point of that? I think that song encapsulates the entire conversation better than I could have, because Cole himself is a certified role model, something that I've never been or can relate to. But also, his last 2 verses in conjunction form this perspective that as a role model, he never signed up for it. He was just doing his own thing, and now because other people respect him so much, it's almost like he's responsible for more than just himself. It's this pressure that some people respond poorly to, and some people proudly undertake. and that's what defines a role model. And this whole discussion about role models proved to me that we like following by example. We're all basically taught how to eat the same way, wash your hands the same way, and write the same way. So it's only natural that we like having an example to follow whenever we do something. So when there is no true example, no one right way to do something, we choose an example to follow, and that's a role model. If you want to be a professional basketball player, you could want to be like Mike, but when you find out later that Michael Jordan cheated on his wife, had a gambling addiction and temper issues, you feel like a fool. But it's not your fault. Well, not really. I've been told that life is like a box of chocolates because of the surprises and you'll never know what you're gonna get, but I think that's an awfully optimistic take. I think more that life is like a box of Legos, not those recent ones where you build whatever's on the front of the box and you're done. I mean like literally just the box that holds a ton of different Legos. And there's a million things you can do with the box of Legos and another million ways to sit and be overwhelmed by what to do. You get out what you decide to put into it. You could do nothing and you will simply own a rather heavy box. You could follow some tutorial, but there's a pretty slim chance that one exists for exactly the type of thing you want to accomplish. And even then, let's say you finished the tutorial. Did it feel that rewarding? Wouldn't you rather have done it by yourself? Not to mention, you still have the rest of the box of Legos, like, you're never done. What I learned from a box of Legos was that at the end of the day, you are satisfied when you are. When it comes to life, I see a lot of the same. You can be anybody and do anything, but the means by which you get there are yours to choose. You could follow what your parents say every step of the way and realize at the end that your life wasn't yours. Or do it all by yourself and maybe you're happy, but also realize that you should have listened to your parents more. There's a lot of maybes, but one thing is for sure. Nobody's going to tell you when you're done. The truth is you're never done, but you're also done when you are. Now, I feel like an idiot when my role models fail me, because as I stated earlier, these people never asked to be role models in the first place. I think it's ignorant to hold someone up to a perfect standard that I can't hold myself. Like when my favorite YouTuber started to make more clickbaity videos for more revenue, I was ashamed of him as if I wouldn't do the same thing for some coin. I'm so broke, dude. If you told me that if I made all my YouTube videos 10 minutes and 2 seconds, I would be able to afford bread toe ones next week, it would happen like that. However, there's two things that keep me sane about my role models. Number one, our role models are just the best version of whoever those people are. We idolize them for what they've accomplished and often don't see below the iceberg. Number two, you can hop off a role model train as quickly as you hopped on. Let's say tomorrow, Rajon Rondo, the man who made me fall in love with basketball and understand the significance of a pass-first point guard, announces that he's a neo-Nazi. I can comfortably say he is no longer my role model and there is no shame because I idolized him for his skills as an enabler on the court before I knew he was a neo-Nazi. Fair? Taking with me this Lego idea, I decided early on in college that I wanted to be better. I grew obsessed with BoJack Horseman. Something about watching the most despicable being trying to improve himself felt relatable. At the end of season 1, BoJack struggles with the publication of a memoir that is a brutally honest take on his life. Instead of painting him as the flawless celebrity that he wants to be cemented in history as, he is exposed to the public as the toxic being that he is. He asks the author of the memoir one last question at the end of season 1, quote, "Am I just doomed to be the person that I am? The person in the book? I know that I can be selfish, narcissistic, and self-destructive, but underneath all that, deep down, I'm a good person. I need you to tell me that I'm good. Please tell me that I'm good." The author of the memoir did not tell him he was good. In fact, she said nothing. Later in the show, she addresses that moment, telling BoJack, quote, "That's the thing. I don't think I believe in a deep down. I kind of think that all you are is just the things that you do." And I think that's true, that we simply are the actions that we make every day. If a dude one day stabbed me and I never saw him again, I would always assume he was a shitty person, but maybe he was just having a bad day. That one quote flipped my whole perspective. Change went from this monumental, reconstructive period of time in my head to a simple change in demeanor, effectively starting the next day. Now, I don't believe that true change can be accomplished in one day, but I do believe in the force of habit. For example, this semester, I wanted to be more empathetic, and I started by trying to be a better listener. I first forced myself to just shut up, and if I didn't get to say everything I wanted to say in a conversation, I was content because I knew I would live to see another one. But eventually, with time, I noticed I was listening more, and it came naturally. I'm not saying to completely disregard your past or forsake the idea of apologizing, but I think actions speak louder than words, and it means more to show you're sorry or show that you've changed instead of saying it. One character in BoJack said it best, quote, "You can't keep doing shitty things and then feel bad about yourself like that makes it okay. You have to be better." To wrap it all up, there's hope for people like me that feel like they've been on the bad side of themselves for a while now, with every new day and every sitting moment. You don't have to be chained down by your past, but don't be scared to acknowledge it. I'm not trying to romanticize being a bad person because yes, that is still inherently bad, but maybe normalizing it and not being afraid to admit that you've done bad things can help you move on. Role models exist, but only because we decide to hold them to that standard. You're not bound to your role model, and if you start to fall out with one, don't be afraid to search for another. We all do bad and we all do good, but at the end of the day, one exists because of the other. If we didn't do bad things at one point, it would be hard to tell if we've ever been good.